All right. Pretty sure that's working now. Let's give ourselves a split second to figure it out, shall we? Let's make sure. Right, that's looking good to me now. About time. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I'm your host, Kane Sims, as we are 1 week away from Unparsed. Can you believe it? It has actually finally come round. Unparsed, the conversational AI conference of the year. I was going to say of the season. It's of the year. The world's most loved conversational AI conference. We're going to have a huge gathering of AI practitioners, conversation designers, developers, product owners, strategists, business leaders, you name it, are going to be in London at the Museum of London on this coming Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for Unparsed. We've got 2 tracks. One is all around design, conversation design, service design, automation design. The other track is all about technical development and implementation. How do you take this technology, this large language model technology, generative AI, and some of the more traditional AI technologies, and integrate them into products, into businesses, productionize them so that they can actually affect people's lives and get business results. And so that's what we're going to be covering next week at Unparsed. You can still get your tickets if you haven't got them already. unparsedconf.com. And seeing as though I love you, seeing as though you are obviously a loyal VUX World fan, you can save 50% on tickets by using the promo code VUX World. All capital letters, all one word. And we will see you in London next week. All right. Now then, let me introduce my guest for today. It took us a little while to get this in the diary, mostly because of my fault for constant rescheduling, but I am so glad that you can join us today, Richard, because this conversation is one that I've been looking forward to for a long time. We share some very similar perspectives on this whole kind of AI automation side of things, so I'm really keen to pick your brains and hear your experience. Richard Smullen, who is the CEO of Pypestream. Welcome to VUX World, and thanks for joining me.
Nice to be here, Kane. Thank you for having me.
Nice one. Whereabouts are you now?
I'm in New York City.
New York
City. Which is why at points in this conversation you will hear sirens blaring past the window.
Yeah. Well, you've got the neon.
Your listeners.
Yeah, it's all right. I live in Harrogate. There's plenty of sirens going on around here. There's a nice neon sign you've got up there. I see we're representing on the branding front. It's looking good.
We are.
Nice.
Proud of what we've built, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So how long have you been going for, Pypestream?
We started Pypestream 9 years ago, and we built the business on this premise that eventually, we said about a decade from then, so give or take a few years still to go, that call centers will start reducing in size and ultimately cease to exist. And go the way of the fax machine, if you will. And we believed if that was going to be a reality, technology would be the driving force behind that. AI would need to be highly developed and functional, and that customers will have a desire to do things themselves and self-serve. So we've been at this for 9 years. I know your previous guest, or certainly one a few months ago, has been at it for 20 years. And I feel we're in the thick of the most exciting part of the industry at this point.
Yeah, that was Chris Ezekiel from Creative Virtual. I think anyone who's been doing this for anything over probably even 5 years is been in this space for long enough to have gone through a number of different kind of waves of the technology, from Facebook Messenger APIs to the Alexa and Amazon Lex kind of arrangements with the NLU kind of bots and stuff like that, and now obviously into large language models and generative AI. So 9 years is a long time in what is, for many, feeling like, at least for those who've just started getting into it since the dawn of ChatGPT and what have you, it feels like it's still a very new industry.
Absolutely. And a constantly evolving industry.
Yeah.
And also a confusing industry, because there's just so much going on inside with different vendors, different software providers, different technologies, all trying to figure out how to put that layer in between the end user, the customer, the agent, broker, dealer, whoever it is, and the machines. And so you're seeing just a lot of noise, a lot of movement, a lot of confusion, quite frankly, and it will settle. It will settle. It's bound to. And those that have the know-how, those that have built the technology and have the customer base that are growing, I think will end up holding the flag. So it's definitely exciting times.
Yeah, it is. It is a very noisy space. I remember we had Sham Aziz, who was at Selfridges on the podcast. He's now at, I think he's now at Centisum or something like that, which joined one of these kind of AI vendors. But when I was talking to him, he was saying that one of the reasons why they haven't pulled the trigger so much at Selfridges on AI was because of that exact reason. It's just too confusing. The market's just too noisy. Everyone's trying to, pitch the same kind of stuff to varying degrees. And one thing's like best thing since sliced bread. And it's kind of like, who do you trust? Where do you go? How do you figure it out? It all seems too kind of hyperbolic and too crazy. And so let's just sit and wait it out and see what happens and who drops and what shakes and wait it out, basically. Are you seeing a similar sort of thing happening for some brands as well, or has ChatGPT sort of pushed everybody now into this kind of implementation phase?
We definitely see a little reticence in the industry, and partly because of ChatGPT and the euphoria around large language models and their ability. And I think what it's done is it's certainly woken everyone up or made them realize that this technology is accessible, it's valuable, and it can help the business. And yet, even in that space, there's competition. And do you go with GPT? Do you go with Gemini? Do you go with Anthropic? We found that most companies attempted a chatbot of some sort, right? And in your previous shows, you said it was a chatbot, then a virtual assistant, then conversational AI, then agents. And really, they are kind of synonyms, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So companies have, and I'm sure Selfridges too, have at least tried something, maybe in their little research lab. It may have been in a particular part of their user journey, maybe on the homepage and in a little intercom chat at the bottom. And I feel that their ability to get the outcomes and really find meaningful impact for the business was delayed. And that's because they started realizing this is not easy. Pypestream has been doing this for 9 years. We have 80 odd people, 25 of which are a dedicated team that is just there to design and build the correct structures, the correct flows to get the outcome that the business needs and to keep the customer happy. And that is not trivial. And so I think what's happened is the excitement of adopting the technology is there, and companies want to do it, but they want to do it right because they have had a previous attempt. It, in most cases, wasn't successful. It didn't reduce volume in the call center, which is a very strong business case for using this technology amongst many, although for us in Pypestream, contact center or call center volume reduction is the reason why we exist. And they weren't seeing that outcome. So there's excitement, there's a little bit of delay, and yet I think the systems are starting up again, and there's belief that this actually works because there is enough proof points in the marketplace now from the slew of vendors, many of which you've interviewed on your show, who've demonstrated that this is now ready to be deployed and deliver the results. Now what it takes is the champion at the large enterprise to actually go out on a limb and say, I'm ready to do this.
Yeah.
And actually be prepared to be the person that takes the blame if it doesn't work, but is ready for the glory if it does. And if done correctly, it will work. This technology is extraordinary. And AI plus automation, replacing a human who was otherwise understanding what you're trying to do and then doing it in a swivel chair is revolutionary. And so the impact, the implications are significant. The challenge is finding that champion and empowering this person to just go out and do it. And so they're emerging. Was it the CIO? Maybe it's the chief digital officer. Sometimes the CMO stepping in. They've got a little bit of internal tug and war going on, but it's definitely speeding up. Sorry, quite a long answer, but an important one because I feel amongst the listeners, you have enterprises and vendors, and I think the condition of the environment applies to all.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned there that, the design of these things is non-trivial. I mean, some vendors would have you believe that it isn't trivial, or that it is trivial, rather, because of large language models now opening up access to this kind of tooling to pretty much anybody. It's just at the end of an API, so you can just build what you want, and large language models are going to solve all of our problems and stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff there. I won't name names, but you've probably seen it yourself. Various different vendors of various different sizes claiming now that because of generative AI, because of large language models, we now all of a sudden by default have immense conversational power, immense actionable kind of power in terms of like large action models and things like that, and that all this stuff actually now is quite trivial. There's not really much to it. Plug in an API to OpenAI, GPT-4o, and all of our problems are solved. Do you kind of I suspect I know what the answer is to this. Maybe I'm kind of teeing you up here, but like, what are your thoughts in terms of like, in terms of that? Is it now trivial to build these things because we've got much more powerful language models, or is it still non-trivial and difficult?
A large language model is just a component of a broader transformation solution, if you will. And so what the large language model has done, and it's achieved this pretty successfully, is it's allowed the understanding of the customer or the human's intent to be much more accurate. That said, even with large language models, if you don't fine-tune them properly, if you don't use the right prompts and engineer those prompts, if you don't train these models correctly, they will hallucinate, they will go off track, they will take the user in directions that actually could harm the business. And so I urge caution to all those that are stepping into it to work with an organization who understands how to put guardrails up and how to tighten the bolts, if you will, and make sure that the technology does a narrow application in what you're trying to achieve. Again, tied to your business objectives. Everything has to be tied to the business objectives. So in our world, the large language models and this generative AI buzz is just a piece of it. And yes, it speeds certain aspects up, but it also means that automation has to be that much more accurate. What does it mean when you're asking the large language model to cancel your account and to update the card? Is it a credit card? Is it your loyalty card? Which systems do you go to? Do you authenticate the user beforehand? Do you do post-authentication? What more information do you need to run the process and the flow at the end? That is not trivial at all. Quite frankly, that is where most of these systems break down. Within 2 or 3 months of OpenAI making their API available, at least 50% of technology companies out there suddenly had a page on generative AI capabilities and what they can do with this. I mean, that I'm guessing 50%, but I would be shocked if it was less than that, because it was such an easy technology to jump on. This was a bandwagon that just everyone needed to be on this shiny object or reaching for it. And so it definitely, to our point earlier, created a lot of noise. And what has been realized in deploying it is that the security around it, you spoke of hallucination in previous conversations, it's a very real issue, and other challenges around large language models have created pause, because the realization is this, again, this is not trivial. What systems does it connect to? And then how do we provide an experience at the interface level to the user, which is much easier to navigate? Do you need text all the time, or can you have a carousel? Can you have a little video that gives you the answers instead of a whole paragraph of text coming through? And therefore, do you really need large language models? Well, if you don't need them and they're quite expensive, then you need a better design aspect. Well, then you need someone to build the front end, because the front end needs to be very intuitive and very modern. And so when you start adding all of that together, including figuring out what processes need to change, because they're not humans doing them anymore on behalf of the customer, but they're actually systems doing them, and how to change those processes. When you put that all together, you realize that it's not trivial at all. In actual fact, it's incredibly complicated, and it's the reason why design thinking, design principles, and creating a outcome related to, or a plan for an outcome related to how happy a customer is and meeting the business objective needs to be the key differentiator here. And then the technology will adapt and be designed accordingly. So certainly not trivial. And I think that's linked to part of what I said prior, in that a lot of these deployments, a lot of these solutions where they were just built as a skunk works project by the team building other technology inside the enterprise, and they threw it up, were actually unsuccessful. And why a lot of the experts, if you will, are becoming, or their technology is becoming more prevalent and more adopted, which certainly we're seeing at Pypestream. It took a while. Who's Pypestream? We've got these other 15 vendors, and we buy this product from these guys and this one, and we'll cobble it together, we'll wrap it, we'll plug it in. And when they switched it on and it didn't work, they were like, wait, this isn't what we thought. And that's this realization that it's incredibly complex. Everything has to work in tandem. Everything has to be harmonious. You've got so many dependencies going on. You've got security to consider. The data's first-party data. You have to treat it with respect. You have to treat it with privacy. You have to know what to do with it. You have to understand where there's fraudulent transactions coming in versus legitimate ones. The experience, the UI for different users. The way that my father may interact with the system versus my niece are going to be two very different approaches. And so if you provide them both the same language, the same visuals, the same experience, one of them is going to have a bit of friction. And so how do you personalize it and adapt it for different cohorts, for different audiences, based on different channels? There's so much to consider. And when you think about that all and you really want to do this properly, you realize that, again, it's not trivial, and you need to start with a good design process.
Yeah. I think there's more in common, and I've been saying this for a while. Our methodology, basically, from the consultancy side of things, is all based around service design, and that's kind of where it starts and ends. Begins with data, figuring out what it is that your customers are having conversations about right now, figuring out what parts of the business that need to be improved because there's friction there or whatever it might be. User research is a component that's totally missing from every methodology I've seen from every company that does this kind of stuff. Going out and actually speaking to customers to figure out what it is that what is their current experience of that business and those services that you're looking to automate, what are their expectations, what are their needs, and what the outcomes they're trying to achieve. And then taking all of that data and that customer research to then figure out what's the best way of solving for these problems, rather than it being, let's just throw a large language model into the mix and let's just do it that way. Maybe it's not a large language model that's needed. Maybe it's not even a conversational interface that's needed. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it is a conversational interface that's needed, but maybe you just need to have as you were saying earlier on, a more kind of an approach to automating the process that is a specific process that has a beginning and an end, as all business processes do. And there's almost this kind of like, I feel as though there's this wave of the influx of the amount of AI automation agencies that exist now, and the amount of new technology companies that now exist, all kind of piggybacking on ChatGPT basically and OpenAI. It's almost as though there's this kind of like this movement, which is that large language models are going to be able to automate all of our business processes far better than we could in any other way. And they're going to be able to have conversations far better than we could in any other way. And that really all you need to do is just basically devolve everything to OpenAI and let that kind of do its thing. But large language models don't understand conversation. You can tell a chatbot that's been developed with a pure large language model, because everything is a response to a question. It doesn't really understand what you're trying to get to. It doesn't really understand any of your actual intent. And you can't necessarily trust a large language model to completely run a process for you, because of the fact that they are statistical, they are prediction-based, and therefore they're not 100% accurate every single time. And so you're going to need technology that sits around it to be able to underpin that process and govern that process and pull in the language models where you need them, basically, rather than... Yeah, I just think for me, it seems as though there is a kind of culture that... You mentioned the new shiny thing. I don't know if you would agree with this, but it seems as though, like, in the same way as like social media kind of distracted people from fixing some internal communication issues that they might have had, or the websites kind of distracted people from fixing some of the business processes that they've currently got, and Skype for Business, when that was rolled out, or whatever it might be, distracted people from really figuring out their internal information management, because attention gets focused on the new shiny object and takes you away from the stuff that you really should be doing. And time and time again from the research I've seen is that the big problems facing enterprises right now when it comes to AI is data. Either the data's rubbish or they don't have data to be able to utilize, and process, because they've got archaic business systems and archaic business processes that are not fit for purpose. So it seems to me as though all of this hype around generative AI, as great as it is and as powerful as these models are and as great as they are at understanding and generating language, which is crucial in part to what we're trying to do here, it almost seems as though it's a bit of a distraction, and we're eventually going to get back round to the fact, which is where most organizations should have been focusing 10 years ago, is fixing your process.
I agree more, Kane. And this notion that generative AI and large language models will solve everything actually makes no sense, because if you start with the outcome that you're trying to arrive at using this technology, or using technology in particular around self-service, then you will find that large language models and generative AI is unnecessary in most use cases. Certainly in our world, we're pretty ubiquitous across streaming and mobile providers here in the US, insurance companies, CPG and health insurance. And we find that I'd say almost 80% of the outcomes we arrive at for our customers through the platform don't require or don't need generative AI. They don't need large language models. They maybe need a little bit of search NLU. They certainly require a lot of visuals. Visual interfaces are very important. And so what we've figured out at Pypestream is, how do you create a hybrid experience for the customer? So can you bring text and dialogue and visuals and immersive elements within those visuals, AR, VR, carousels, videos, other multimedia? Can you bring them all together in what looks like a chat meets an app? And that when you switch on analytics, which is a key part of this, by the way, and I haven't mentioned it till now, which is an oversight, but it's arguably the most important part of an entire implementation, is analyzing how the users are behaving, how are they traversing, is there confusion, where is the confusion, and where else can we automate to provide more happiness and more outcomes, is crucial. But when you switch on and analyze the systems, and I'd advocate to your customers to always A/B test and just see if the theories meet reality. And when you do that, you'll find that, again, you don't need large language models in most of these situations. When you phone a call center and you want to get your seat changed on the plane, or you want to cancel your insurance policy, you don't want to have a conversation with the person there. Most people don't. Some people do, and that's fine. Most people want to get on the phone, get it done, and get on with their day and get on with their life. Well, if you put a very advanced, open-ended large language model between the customer and an outcome, it's going to have a dialogue, and it's going to take them potentially on or in directions that they don't necessarily need to go. And that's just going to add cost to the organization. And so best for the outcome, you use the best technology or the best layer, and it's not always the large language models. And so once you've fixed your processes, so back to your point, which are often archaic, often require a lot of reengineering, and then you sort the data out, you scrub it, and you make sure you can access it and it makes sense, then writing the right workflows, putting the right layer in there of understanding what the user wants. Sometimes you don't even need to have them write anything into the conversation. You disable the text input box, and all you do is you put a scroll left if you want to troubleshoot your Roku, or scroll right if you want to upgrade your streaming. And that is enough in explaining what the intent is of why you're there. And then the system can take you through a digital workflow, which could be very graphical. In Pypestream's case, we use graphics and as I mentioned, this hybrid model extensively. And proving to outperform typical text back and forth with a chatbot in some cases by 80% in terms of satisfaction, in terms of happiness, and in terms of outcomes. And so it's an interesting world because, of course, you've got those with the agenda to push the large language models. You've got others who are app or process based, and we believe it's a hybrid.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's almost as though you've been reading my mind because, so Unparsed is next week. And for Unparsed, we've put together to launch at Unparsed, to give away essentially. I'll be spoiling it for some people who are going to be at Unparsed. But essentially, we have this 12 principles of AI design. And really, it's a mixture of some conversation design principles, kind of, a lot of service design principles. As I mentioned, we're very much heavily invested in service design, because I think that's essentially what we're talking about here in a lot of cases. It's figuring out how to deliver the services that the business has through a interface that is more natural. I was going to say through a conversation interface, but you're right that a lot of the stuff that you may end up doing doesn't necessarily rely necessarily on language. And I want to share a couple of these with you because your last monologue there touches on a lot of the stuff that's in here. So data-driven is one thing, and not just using data to derive use cases, but also to validate designs. That's your A/B multivariate testing you were talking about. Also to improve outcomes. So fuel interactions as well, actually. So that's bringing data into the conversations. That's whether you're using large language models or otherwise, data from back-end systems or what have you. And also to improve outcomes. So you can't, as you said, you can't change anything unless you can understand it. And so I'll be really curious to learn a bit more about Pypestream and how you approach this, because in the past with our deployments, what we've had to do is essentially tag every single part of a conversation with multiple tags depending on where the user is in their journey. And then that is what we use to then visualize what's going on. So we can see a conversation started here, the user triggered this intent, and then they went to this path, and we can build a journey from that, and we can see what choke points there are in the conversation from that, all that kind of stuff. And then you're also talking about down here, which we call kind of being agnostic as a principle, which is that using the right modality for the right use case, first of all, which means that not every use case is going to warrant a conversation. Sometimes it'd be miles better for you just to go and fill in this quick online form and that'll be the end of it, but also for the right modality for the right channel, because if you're on a website, you might have the ability to do things like you just suggested, use a data picker instead of trying to capture language, or a postcode lookup to be able to find a postcode and an address rather than trying to deal with natural language. But also, even at the turn level, so every single turn within a dialogue, you should be selecting the right modality for that particular piece of the conversation. And then not everything has to be dialogue, which I think is another thing that is overlooked, which is that because we've got a chatbot, everything should be language in, language out, whereas actually it should be the best possible kind of modality or thing at that time to serve the use case best, I'd have to send you this, because I'd really love your thoughts on this, because everything you're kind of talking about is really ticking a load of boxes here.
Yeah, it looks extensive and it looks very thorough and thoughtful, so happy to share my thoughts. One point you brought up, and there's a lot in there, I'll just tap one here, is this notion of understanding the conversation parts. And so what we do is we break the conversation up into hundreds, sometimes thousands of little components. We call those nodes. And nodes are parts of the conversation that lead to other parts, which themselves are nodes. And so if you have everything broken up and you can monitor the traversal of users through the nodes, you get a lot of feedback about what's going on so that you can improve the design. You can therefore modify it or change something. Maybe there's an API that's not firing fast enough. It's creating a lag. Users are abandoning. That's an unhealthy exit. So the node will flash red. And we have this control center where we observe the different solutions and our customers' workflows in real time. So we make sure customers are always getting the required outcomes. And so in that process, you can have a node that says at this point, because the user's begun the conversation in Facebook Messenger or maybe in WhatsApp or Apple Messages, this is a good point to trigger a callback. And that node will then change the modality. And then you can analyze, once the callback happened, was there fall off? Did the user get to the outcome? Did they indicate satisfaction at the end or happiness in our world? And so measurement is everything, quite frankly. And I think that's a lot of where the breakage in these implementations has come from, is that measurement isn't fully there. I won't mention the airline's name, and there is significant work that's been done on their virtual assistant, and yet there's a lot of requests to be escalated to live support. I think 80-something% of the time, 83% of the time, yet it's a virtual assistant that's meant to help you. And so, and the belief there is that the analytics and the team internally aren't placing enough emphasis or focus on, let's actually watch what the user's doing and let's see where there's ambiguity. Let's see where, if maybe we narrowed the use cases and made this one function much better, we could at least solve this whole area of our business, instead of trying to be all things to all use cases and therefore not achieving anything satisfactorily, which is why there's just so much burden on these chat agents. And it comes down to analytics and measurement, the right modality, the right nomenclature even. And that's also where design comes in, because you don't want to sound robotic. You don't want to sound like the user is being treated like every other user, because with AI and with this technology, you can be hyper personalized. You can speak to, again, we'll use the analogy of my father and my niece. You can speak to them differently. Salutations can be different. Formality could be different. The depth of the dialogue can be different. One can be more technical. One can be more directional and indicate you're doing more on behalf of the customer than giving them more empowerment. So there's just so much to consider, which I'm sure is reflected fully in that document you shared. And again, I'd be happy to share my thoughts.
That'd be really appreciated. Yeah. It got me thinking about kind of, there isn't a great load of companies that are getting this right. I don't know what the airline is that you mentioned, but even Apple. Did you see the WWDC recent event this week from Apple? Don't know if you had a chance to see it, but
I've read bits and pieces about it. I won't be able to give you a deep analysis here. It's really Siri gone to the next level, right? With that one.
Yeah, that's what you'll be led to believe. But then I watched it over lunch today, the Siri bit, and a lot of the stuff that they were talking about, it doesn't require, first of all, it should have been done a long time ago, and it doesn't necessarily require much AI, if any, or at least not a large language model. So one of the things that they were talking about is that now, apparently, in 2024, Siri will enable you to correct what you're saying. So if you say, call my dad, oh no, I mean my mum, now Siri can understand you. And it's like, that stuff is the stuff that you've been able to do for decades. That's not complex language understanding. And the other thing that made me laugh was there's another bit, which is that, let's say if you wanted to get direction, let's say if you wanted to check the opening times, for example, of a restaurant, can you tell me what time Carluccio's is open till? And it will respond back and say, oh, it's open till 8 p.m. And then you would then follow that on and say, well, could you get me directions there? Or could you book me a taxi there? So all you're doing really is you're keeping hold of the context from the previous turn so that you understand the entity that you're referencing. And in the follow-on turn, you're then saying, can you get me directions to that place we were talking about earlier on? And that was one of the features that they announced, like, oh, that's brand new. It's like, this is stuff that has been in existence for almost a decade. There's some cool stuff, don't get me wrong. There's some stuff in there that is pretty cool. But there's some stuff that made the announcement that I was like, this should have been in a Siri update in 2012. It's mad.
So again, I haven't dug into it, and you're the expert. So if you're saying that, I concur, and it just shows how
something went wrong. Please try again.
That's Siri.
I think it shows how maybe uninformed or unexposed the general public is to this technology, which again creates the excitement of saying, hey, there are robots essentially, or computers that are going to help make your life more convenient. It's convenience, all of this, right?
Yeah.
It's just to recover more time so I can do more stuff. So it's this harmonious system. And yeah, I'm surprised if that's the draw card, that it can do things that have been around for this long.
It's mad. Don't get me wrong, there's some good stuff there, but like, yeah, there's a couple of things that I was like, that sounds like very much a solved problem. So at the very beginning, you mentioned that one of the reasons for founding Pypestream was that you kind of were looking around and you realized that the contact center was something that is highly likely not to exist in future, because of technology being able to do a lot of that kind of stuff. Definitely it's the case that what you were talking about in terms of a lot of the processes that exist in businesses are not really fit for automation right now. There's a lot of manual pushing and pulling. There's a lot of stuff that's just like ended up the way that it is because of decades worth of just other shit being added on to the process. We've got to do this now, we've got to do that now. And processes really not really having been designed. They just kind of emerge out of a need kind of thing. But if you look at if you look at Gartner, for example, Gartner will predict that 40% of jobs will be lost in the contact center by, I think, 2030 or 2034, it might be. I was at an event last week, and there was a guy called Stuart McCann, did a great presentation from BCG, Boston Consulting Group, and he was predicting, according to various research from Gartner and others, or media and others, that the contact center in the next kind of decade is going to essentially lose the frontline sort of like tier one support stuff, and that the contact center over time is going to become a mixture of dealing with the operational day-to-day and also working on continuous improvement initiatives to improve the technology that it has, as well as investments in technology going up by something like 30 to 40% or so. So Gartner and the media and a few others are kind of predicting that there's going to be definitely a decrease in job availability in the contact center over the next decade. Do you think that the thought that you had at the beginning, which is there's going to be no need for contact centers in future, do you think that will emerge and arrive at some point, or do you think there'll always be the need for some people to be there to mop up stuff or deal with more complex stuff and all that kind of stuff, or is that more of a medium-term problem, do you think?
There are certain businesses, certain use cases, certain situations where you need a human there. Emergency services, issues around incredibly high value transactions and the like. And just human nature, the disposition is wanting to speak to someone empathetic who can help me, and knowing that person shares the pain or the urgency of what's going on. So I think there will always be a need for that human contact. And yet in the industries that use contact centers the most, those types of interactions aren't prevalent. They're the exception. And so the front line, this tier one, this tier two, I think will all go away. And part of the reason is because it's what customers want. Customers want to self-serve. We're very technologically forward. We want to do things on our own time. We don't want to stop what we're doing to now focus our attention and be consumed by something that disrupts our day, if you will. You don't know how long it's going to take. I can't even tell you how many times I get messages from friends or screenshots with how long they've been on a call with an agent for an hour and 20 minutes with this vendor, with this cable provider and this airline. It's crazy. So it's very unfair to expect consumers who are paying you their money to go through these painful long processes. So for that reason alone, I do believe that when this technology works well and it's presented to the customers, they're all going to opt for it, and naturally that will see the reduction of call centers. And so I do fully believe it, and we're seeing it. One of our customers had 66 individuals answering the phone and email around complaints, purely complaints. This was just a complaint service. And since implementing Pypestream and replacing on their website, when you go to support, it only opens up the Pypestream interface. There's no more phone number. There's no other way to interact. They've been able to essentially close that entire facility down. Now those 66 people are still all employed by the company. Some moved into prompt engineering, some were upskilled into UI development. And so this notion that, all those people that were in the call center now are going to be unemployed, quite frankly, doesn't make sense, and it never has when there've been industrial revolutions and when there's been technology advancement, because people change skills, new industries emerge that we didn't even know existed or didn't think would exist, and this becomes the workforce in those industries. And so again, people aren't rolling up in a ball saying, I lost my job, I've got I'm down and out. No, they go, right, I've got to feed the family, I've got to pay the rent, I'm going to find something else out to do. And another important point on that, I know you didn't really go into this, but I feel it's coming next, is that call center employee attrition is the highest of any industry in the service world. Call center agents despise being in the call center, being on the receiving end of whatever the interactions are, dealing with most of the time frustrated, angry customers. And so attrition's very high. Employee satisfaction in the call center is very low. And people move on. They look for new things to do. And so I think this is broadly just really good in general for the evolution and advancement of consumerism, of businesses that want to create more profitability, because it's much cheaper to have AI handle an interaction than a human. And so the system evolves, and we're going through another industrial revolution, if you will.
I definitely agree with that. What are the sort of like goals that your clients are trying to achieve then? So, because the most common assumption from those looking at AI from the outside is that it's all about job losses, it's all about getting rid of people, it's all about saving costs. Those companies never want to answer our phone calls, they're just trying to save costs, and that's kind of one element of it. But in order to actually save costs, then you do need to take out people from the workforce, because that's a large part of your cost is your staff, isn't it? But that example you gave there, that's not what that company is doing. Loads of examples where that's actually not what companies are doing. Most of the time they are redeploying those people to manage the AI services. IKEA's got a great example where it redeployed staff still on the phones, but now instead of taking phone calls from complaining customers, they're taking phone calls from people who are trying to plan a kitchen, and they become interior design consultants, and they're charging £40 an hour or something like that for the call. So what, from your kind of experience, what is it that your clients are trying to accomplish? Because it doesn't seem like it's a big cost-saving focus if they're keeping hold of the staff,
Really depends. This particular customer, ironically, it actually was cost-saving, because they were going to hire people to do prompt engineering, and they were going to hire people to do UI elsewhere. And by shifting these people, they didn't need to make those extra 60-odd hires. We have customers who their sole objective is to retain their customers for longer. So building automation that reminds you about what shows on, or offers you the option to record a show so you don't miss it. So being very proactive with care, with service, predicting what the customer wants and needs, and then, as I say, creating an outbound, whether it's with a text or some kind of push saying, hey, we see you're trying to update your credit card, or hey, your credit card's expiring tomorrow, click here to update it. That is really just to make the customer experience better and make the customer feel like they're really cared about and not taken for granted. So there's a lot of loyalty outcomes. Cost is really the biggest one. Again, that example I gave, they didn't hire an extra team to do all these other roles. And so it's very much customer specific and within the customer use case specific. So we have customers that are using us on their homepage to help prospects find the best product, using an assistant and using generative AI to navigate you through and give you the best option to go for. Procter & Gamble being a big customer, if you want to get a Braun razor, if you want to get Gillette razors, you'll go through this process on the homepage. And that's a whole other team that bought Pypestream who said, we want to reduce the purchase funnel. We want to get from consideration to purchase much faster. And we can do it in this interface that makes the prospect feel like they're understood and can really be given something accurate without any agenda. And so once the customer purchases, they then get asked to sign up and create an account or password. And from there, the loyalty application starts. And so now you've got the loyalty team who say, oh, we want to piggyback on what the marketing team bought from Pypestream. We want to build loyalty applications within Pypestream. We call these micro apps, and we want to start offering points. We want points redemption. We want to offer you points on your birthday. So we want to say happy birthday. And so we've got these processes that trigger from the CRM to send Kane a text when it's his birthday. And then you've got the customer service people who are saying, well, we want to piggyback on that too, because if they have an issue with the product, or they want an additional blade or something related, we want them to be able to tell us that in the same experience, the same interface. So you start seeing this consolidation of what were otherwise siloed departments using different products, different chatbots, different interfaces into a single experience that starts at the beginning of the customer journey and goes all the way through till end of life. And that commonality is another outcome that customers are looking for, that they want their customer to just find it easy, always there, understandable, and not have to learn how to interface with the different experiences because the different teams use them in different silos. And so that consolidation has become crucial, and we're benefiting from it because, as I said, a lot of our customers, if you go to Clear, the TSA's partner in expedited security at the airport, another Pypestream customer, and they've named the Pypestream experience Clara, which is their virtual assistant. You can learn all about Clear and you can get questions answered, or you can log into your account and have all sorts of servicing and care functions performed for you, which were otherwise done by a call center. So there's just so much that can be done now. And again, when the advocate, when the champion, when the person in the organization is found who's willing to take the risk of getting this done, and he or she starts with design thinking at the core, mapped to outcomes, which again could be different outcomes for different use cases, then everything else will flow from there. And again, the success we're seeing is unprecedented, even from a year ago, with how much the outcome accomplishments being achieved. So this is very real. I tell you, Kane, I'm excited for the conference, and I think everyone's going to learn from it. But the application of this technology across every aspect of a business is far greater than anyone realizes, in part because of what I described with consolidating departments into a single group that can do marketing, sales, and servicing, as well as using it across all sorts of different constituents. So you can use this to employees so they can self-service for HR, servicing, telemedicine, training. You can use this for external facing customers. You can use it for third parties, vendors, helping them get paid and understanding where their check is it really in the mail, or I received it, but it's not the amount that I invoiced you for. Why not? All of this can now be automated and built using this technology. And that's 3 to 5 years from now going to be the norm, we believe, across certainly, I don't know if there's such a thing as Fortune 5,000, but certainly the 5,000 biggest companies in the world will all be very deep in these transformations.
Definitely. And that's what transformation is, basically, isn't it? It's knocking down them silos, consolidating all of that kind of mess that sits around behind the scenes, giving the customer one unified front end of doing business with someone. And when businesses look at the channels that they've got and where they actually interact with customers, every single one of those channels is a conversational channel, or can be a conversational channel. Your emails, your website, your contact center, phone calls, every single surface that you have, your app, can all be conversational. And it makes sense then that why have all of these people with all of these clunky processes trying to handle contact across all these different channels when you can consolidate all of that contact through one front end, distribute it across many channels. You can standardize all of the processes that you have behind the scenes so that every single customer gets the same process and it can be distributed to whatever channel it needs to be. And then you can then really affect the customer journey, which is what a lot of organizations are trying to do, isn't it? They're trying to impact the journey rather than this one little bit. And I think what you're describing there is a perfect example of doing that, but it just takes that champion, but it also takes the business to understand that what we're talking about here isn't necessarily putting a chatbot on our website and taking our knowledge base and giving it that. Really what we're talking about is re-examining the way that we do business, the way that we serve customers, the way we organize ourselves, the kind of people we hire, and everything from front to back,
I'll give you an example of where that's succeeded for us. Large insurance customer, very extensive process. They've been running this process for first notice of loss for, 30, 40 years. Came to Pypestream, they said, help us first understand, can this process be re-engineered if it was handled by AI and automation? And we took a look at this process and superimposed automation, AI, large language model, data scrubbing on top of it. And we found that it was so inflated. For example, they had an entire department that the claim would go to over a week to detect fraud. And that process was in itself very convoluted. And so we implemented a couple of checks digitally to check claim history, check other information about the user. One of the claims require a quick soft credit check. And we presented to them the process that was maybe 50 steps before Pypestream. It was compressed by 50%. It was now 25 steps. And now they've got this live to their customers. They're seeing a cost reduction that we didn't even, when we told them we'll reduce costs, we didn't even have a sense or realize it can be of this magnitude. And not only that, their customers are starting to advocate to their friends, you've got to join this insurance company. They're so much better. They've got this process. It feels like I'm in full control. I'm swiping 3 times, hitting click, and 5 minutes later, I've got my claim. And when I did it 6 months ago, it took 2 weeks. And so it's all part of it. So yes, it's a total re-engineering. Throwing up a chatbot and throwing in the, what do they say? Rubbish in, rubbish out. Is exactly true of this. You can't just throw it up, connect it to your knowledge management system, connect it to the old processes, have a couple of engineers work on this in their spare time while they're not building insurance backend systems and expect this to work. That's not trivial, and it requires a lot of know-how, experience, and understanding of where to reduce cognitive load. Where is cognitive load going to create frustration? Where's cognitive load actually good to increase because it will make the user feel like you're learning more about them, and therefore they'll be more loyal to you long term because you care. There's so many nuances in all of this, which again come down to the design thinking. But yes, you have to re-engineer and you have to transform, and you have to have partners in doing that for you. And certainly that's what we've figured out at Pypestream, which is why we have this internal team. As I said, there's 25 of them. They're former consultants from IBM, from Nuance, from McKinsey, from Bain, and they've come in and they're this group that we deploy, and we second them into our customers to help them accelerate this, find out what's wrong. We don't charge for it. It's a pure service to help you realize, well, first help you see if there's opportunity to transform, and quite frankly, there is everywhere. And I said, I would be surprised if 3 to 5 years from now, the top 5,000 companies in the world aren't all using this in some area. So once we've helped you realize that, then we'll show you where it can get done. We show you the as is, and we'll show you the to be, and we show you how to get there. And we document it very, very, very precisely in this extensive report. And we've found the use cases, and we'll show, look, if all we do is just account management and maybe technician dispatch, look at the impact it will have on your business. Let's just start there, and then we'll add these 2 and then these 4, and eventually you have this entire life cycle automation system that's handling everything from marketing to servicing that I described. We've transformed the business, and you got there piece by piece, because you can't boil the ocean. I mean, you intimated that earlier. You can't just expect this to do everything for everybody out the gates. It will never work. And we found that. So you start with a few, you add more, you keep analyzing, you fix the ones that you've done, you add ones that you now see that you need, because the analytics is saying, hey, Kane, customers are asking where the store is. One of our customers, Sherwin-Williams, phenomenal customer who is all about digital first and wants their customers to have the most seamless, easiest relationship with them so that they can get their paint and get their physical lives looking as beautiful as possible, get told by us other places where if we switched on a little micro app to do this, their customers will be happier. And they trust us. And they said, great, go for it, guys, do it. And so we've built this incredible system for them, which is helping with servicing, finding the right paint color, loyalty, updates. And they were going to build a call center. So this isn't a case of we got rid of it. They were going to build that for how much their business has seen growth, and they don't need to anymore. So there really is a lot of examples out there of the impact that this has. And again, yes, it's transformation. It's this was us back then, and this is us now. And in this version of us, we're using AI, we're using automation, we're using UI, digital UI, we're using the power of the browser as an app, this hybrid notion of visuals plus messaging, all combined into one proposition.
Brilliant. That is absolute poetry, isn't it? Last question. What do you think that this does to the sort of technology landscape? Because businesses need technology to make this stuff happen. You've got the old kind of legacy players, if you like, who've traditionally ran most of the contact centers in the world, the Avayas and the Ciscos and the Genesis of the world. But then you've got this new breed of company, the Pypestreams of the world, that are, providing the capabilities that businesses can use, which basically, if you do it right, and if your vision of the future transpires, you don't need contact centers. Really, what you need is a conversational UI that can have different components in there that's right for the use case, that can be distributed into any channel, and that really consolidates and automates business processes behind the scenes, using humans where needed, but over time, tier 1 and tier 2, not so much. So what do you think it does to the technology landscape of those big players now who are, at the moment, they're charging licenses for bums on seats, and the BPOs that have the exact same kind of business model? What do you think the impact is going to be for those kind of players?
Significant. Their entire business model, as you said, is built on the premise of seats and people and handling that. I don't think many of them took this technology as seriously a couple of years ago as they are now, because they are seeing companies like Pypestream really redirect the traffic away from them. And so there's going to be consolidation, there's going to be acquisitions. There is also going to be questions asked by the company as to, are you trying to sell me seats, or are you trying to create automation, because you're going to erode your revenue? So there's a little bit of mistrust that some of these contact center providers don't really have the true interest of the customer's savings objectives at heart. And I think that's going to result in companies like Pypestream, and there's a slew of others that are the new kids on the block, if you will, that just do this and do it well, that will start becoming the primary relationship. And then the escalation to the contact center will become secondary. Whereas right now, the contact center is primary, and they're asking the contact center to throw up a chatbot, throw up a little help center. It doesn't work. They're competing with themselves. And quite frankly, we know it doesn't work, because we've got a few nasty emails from contact center providers out there saying, hey, you can't do this. Let's be partners. Hey, we had all this volume going through, and now we have to reduce our billing to this customer because Pypestream's taking it away from them. Our answer is, sorry, that's the nature. I don't know what to say. I mean, sorry for doing what we promised well. And so it will be interesting to see what they do, these vendors you've mentioned. It's a tough one. BPOs, we've started working with a handful of them who are white labeling our platform and offering it out to their customers as a way to hold on to the customer, because the customer's saying, hey, BPO, why are you not giving us generative AI, conversational AI, automation? Why are you not giving us this Pypestream type of experience? if you don't, we're going to go elsewhere. So now they're saying, no, we've got it. Just stay with us. And they'll rather hold on to the business than lose it. The other thing is there's a lot of margin in using technology to accomplish these objectives. So you may not have the same revenue as the vendor, but you'll certainly have equal or greater profit because it isn't all human capital based. It isn't all infrastructure based. And in our world, it's all cloud based, and it's everything's very fluid and agile and component based. So you can dial it up, dial it down. And so again, this is very disruptive. It will be interesting to see. I don't have a crystal ball, Kane, and if I were a typical contact center company now without offering something of this sophistication and performance, I would be concerned for just longevity of the business. As I say, I don't think it's going away. So these companies will still be around. And without mentioning a name, one particular contact center messaging business has seen its market cap over the last year drop, I don't know, 90-odd%. There's other reasons for that, and also the lag in their delivering to the market something of this caliber. So it started, and again, don't know how it's going to end, but certainly consolidation is going to be everywhere.
Yeah, agreed. I've heard from a number of people around two companies in particular that have apparently been doing not so great. And for me, it's the confidence that the contact center providers have is a little bit misplaced, because from the conversations that I've had and been privy to, and you know, speaking to others that work at these places and stuff like that, it's like there's this kind of thought that, well, because we do voice and we've always done voice, then therefore surely voice bots is our jam. That's what we should be doing, and you know, trust us with it because we've been doing voice for ages. But it's actually a totally different thing. Everything that you've been explaining today, process design, interaction design, business transformation, you turn all of that into a conversation and a dialogue. The only voice bit that the experience that would serve you well from the contact center is just connecting it into your contact center. Everything else is a totally different skill set. And the BPOs and stuff, I know of a number of BPOs who are, you know, quite rightly jumping on this because it is a threat to their longer term business model, and a lot of system integrators as well. And the challenge that kind of they have is that there isn't a great deal of kind of, you know, skills in this stuff that we've been talking about. You know, that's why I think people get drawn to large language models, because you can just prompt it and it will just do something, and now that's solved our problem. And you don't have to do the process design, you don't have to do the messy integrations, you don't have to do all of that kind of organizational change management that you would have to do otherwise. So it almost seems as though it's a little bit kind of like, yeah, I don't know, I don't really know where I was going with that point. It just seems as though, like, yeah, there's a lot of businesses I think that are going to be shaken up by this kind of stuff in the next 5 years.
Voice is a big one, right? Because voice has historically been the modality of choice and the modality of success. And so you have many organizations that believe that the voice modality needs to be the interface for automation and this AI technology. And we disprove this on every single opportunity, and in every single data point, we disprove this, because the reality is voice is only chosen when there isn't another option, or when that option is perceived to be inferior. And so when we show that the digital experience is not only not inferior, but in some cases it's superior, and we offer both options to the customer and they understand the digital experience is superior, 10 out of 10 times the user's traversing down that path. And these are historically all voice-heavy insurance, call center, consumer packaged good companies. So voice, we believe, is also going to start having a pretty rapid decline in its adoption. And also, voice requires cognition. It requires you stopping. You're in environments that you have to be in a room or have to be in a private area where you can speak, whereas digital allows you to do anything you can. I did hear a story, whether it's true or not. I believe it's true. I don't know the extent of it, but Uber did have a voice bot. But because the Uber app experience is so easy and it's so quick and it's so intuitive, no one calls in for an Uber. And even the idea of calling in makes no sense. And yet before Uber came, all you did was call in for a car. So here's an example of digital working well superior, quite frankly, and then the voice channel disappearing, and Uber's there and phoning for a car seems as archaic as faxing somebody a document. So voice is there. It's certainly not our friend. We're fine. We work with voice. And again, in every instance, users are going down the non-voice path, and it's much cheaper, by the way. Converting speech to text, text to speech, and then the potential for error in the conversion is far greater than people think. And so just swiping 3 times, hitting a proceed, and then doing a squiggly, which is the way to authenticate, is just far preferred by customers.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. It makes total sense. If you look at Uber, no one, I mean, phoning a taxi now is proper archaic, isn't it? You have to call a taxi rank, like, can you come and pick me up? Where are you? Well, I'm just on the corner of such and such and such and such. It's like, where's that? Is that the one near so and so? No, it's like, oh my God, this feels like an absolute nightmare. Miles better just to say, I'm here. This is where I am on the map. Come and pick me up from here. And that's it, done and dusted. And you can communicate a lot more as well, can't you? This is going to be your driver, this is going to be the number plate, this is going to be the car type. It's just, far superior.
And by the way, just on Uber very quickly, is if you had an issue with your trip, you left something in the car, whatever it may be, you used to have to phone them. They then replaced that with a digital experience. I don't know if you've ever been through an issue around being charged or cancellation. It's extraordinary. You get to resolution within a few clicks. And you get on with your day. So they've been able to totally reduce volume into that call center. I don't even know if it exists anymore, all because of automation and AI. So they're a great example. They're a gold standard, and it explains it in their valuation and their global ubiquity. But again, Kane, love that you do this, because you're early in something that's going to be ubiquitous and that's going to transform businesses everywhere, because you don't only need to use this in customer service. You can use this everywhere. You can use this internally. You can even have conversational AI between machines. So machines asking other machines to extract information, process something without the human needing to ask. And so there's no limit to really the application here. And so it's early, and it's in our opinion, it's going to be one of the biggest industries, bar none, across the whole technology landscape.
Agreed. And we're just getting started. And talking of which, you're talking about there, customer service is one element, but there's lots more to it, and definitely there is. And at Unparsed, don't know if I mentioned Unparsed yet. Have I mentioned Unparsed yet? At Unparsed.
I did also.
Yeah. At Unparsed, we're going to be talking about, again, conversational UI, but across surfaces and products and all that kind of stuff. It's not all customer service. So we have Meta talking about designing for the Ray-Ban glasses. We've got kind of a whole bunch of Google talking about Gemini, designing for Gemini, and oh god, it's immense, absolutely immense. And so you do want to be there. unparsedconf.com. Use the promo code VUXWorld and you can save a bit of coin, because it's coming up. It's in a few days' time. And Richard, we'll have to get you at the next one next year, definitely.
Yeah, be an honor. Thanks, Kane. This was awesome. Enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. And I'll put the links in the show notes for those that are interested in checking it out. You can go to pypestream.com. That's pipe with a Y, pypestream.com. It's behind Rich there, but if you're not tuning in online and you're watching it or listening on your podcast player, it's pypestream.com, pipe with a Y. And go and check it out.
And I'm Richard at pypestream.com if anyone wanted to pick up the conversation.
Perfect. Richard at pypestream.com. Perfect. Nice one, Richard. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, my friend. Let's do this again sometime. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I loved it. Thanks, Kate.
Nice one. Cheers all. Speak.